I shouldn't have been here. Standing in her kitchen, the late afternoon light stretching across the polished wooden floor, I felt like an intruder in a world that didn't quite belong to me. And yet, I couldn't leave. Not while she was there, just a few steps away, leaning against the counter, her fingers brushing the rim of a coffee mug in that absent-minded way she had. Her name was Layla. She had this grace, the kind that made every small movement feel deliberate, yet effortless. I watched her tilt her head, her dark hair catching the sun in subtle copper streaks, and I caught a faint smile, just for a fraction of a second, that seemed almost private, as if it belonged to me and nobody else. "I didn't expect you today," she said, her voice calm, soft, and yet somehow charged. There was an almost imperceptible tremor, though, in the way she lingered on the syllables. "I thought I'd drop by," I mumbled, suddenly aware of my own hands, the way they fidgeted at my sides, the crease of uncertainty I couldn't smooth out. My eyes kept drifting to her, to the curve of her jaw, the way her collarbone peaked above the neckline of her blouse, the gentle warmth radiating off her skin that somehow made the air feel heavier. She turned slightly, and our hands brushed. Just a fleeting touch, almost accidental, but long enough to leave a spark, a quiet jolt that made me hesitate. She didn't pull away, either. Instead, her fingers lingered near mine, a whisper of contact, and I wanted to linger too, but I didn't. Layla's laugh broke the pause, low and musical, almost shy, as if she was both inviting me in and warning me off at the same time. "You've grown," she said, tilting her head like she was measuring me, assessing how much of the boy she used to know was still there and how much was something else entirely. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, guess I have." My eyes betrayed me, though. They stayed on hers longer than I meant them to, tracing the subtle lines at the corners, the quiet vulnerability she carried beneath that calm, confident exterior. The kitchen felt impossibly small. The scent of brewed coffee, faint citrus from the fruit bowl, the hum of the refrigerator, it all seemed to pulse around us, matching the quickening of my own heartbeat. I wanted to speak, to say something clever or innocent, but the words died before they left my mouth. Her gaze shifted, softer now, almost cautious, and for a moment, I could swear the air between us was suspended, fragile, and electric. Then her voice came again, low, teasing, dangerous in the way only she could make it. "If you tell him," she began, pausing, letting the sentence hang between us like smoke curling in sunlight. Her eyes caught mine, serious now, intimate. "We're both in trouble." The words made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask which one of us she meant, wanted to lean closer, touch her hand, make sure she wasn't just teasing. But before I could, the front door opened with a creak, and the spell broke. Her head snapped toward the sound, just the slightest flicker of unease crossing her face. My stomach sank as I realized the timing, or the timing realized itself, and I had no control. And just like that, the quiet tension, the electric brush of fingertips, the half-smile, the unspoken weight of something dangerous and thrilling, was suddenly on the edge, waiting. Waiting for me. Waiting for her. Waiting for a choice neither of us had yet made. The moment the door closed behind whoever had interrupted us, the kitchen felt impossibly private again, like the rest of the world had been muted, leaving only the two of us suspended in a delicate tension. I tried to pretend I wasn't aware of her proximity, of the way her perfume, something warm, faintly floral, with an undertone of something earthy, settled around me, making the space between us almost unbearable. Layla reached for the mug she'd set down moments before, but her fingers brushed mine again. This time I didn't pull back, not entirely. My hand hovered, trembling slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something behind her eyes. Vulnerability, a shadow of loneliness that mirrored my own. She was careful, meticulous about the way she presented herself to the world. But here, in this stolen moment, the edges softened. "You always knew how to make an entrance," she said, voice low, almost teasing, though her lips trembled just slightly. I swallowed. "I guess some things don't change." Her gaze flicked away for a heartbeat, then returned, sharper now, measuring me, weighing the risk of whatever this was, whatever we were inching toward. The thought of it made my chest tighten. There was a danger here, unspoken yet obvious. Our proximity, the age gap, the social lines we weren't supposed to cross. And yet, every glance, every lingering touch seemed to pull us closer, like invisible threads tightening between us. I remembered snippets from her life, the stories she'd shared in passing, a marriage that ended quietly, leaving scars she rarely mentioned, a son who was technically my friend, whose trust one had always valued, long nights alone, reading or listening to music she pretended not to cry to. And now, here she was, leaning slightly toward me, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, her fingers lingering against her own neck, and my mind betrayed me, tracing, imagining, aching. I didn't expect this, I muttered, unsure if I meant her being here or the way my body reacted to her nearness. Her hand hovered near mine again, and she let out a quiet breath, almost imperceptible, but enough for me to hear. I wanted to close the space, to anchor myself against her warmth, but she shifted just enough to remind me that she was fully aware of the effect she had, and fully capable of pulling away. We stood like that for a long moment, neither of us speaking, our eyes locked. There was something unspoken in the air, mutual recognition, the thrill of danger, and a strange, tender understanding that neither of us had admitted aloud. Then, almost casually, her fingers brushed the back of my hand again. This time, it wasn't accidental. My pulse jumped. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold on either, leaving the touch suspended between us, electric and quiet. It was a small concession, a tiny bridge over the invisible line we both knew we shouldn't cross, and yet, somehow, couldn't resist. In that pause, with the sun slipping low outside and the kitchen humming softly around us, I realized how much she mattered to me, and how much I longed for the one thing we weren't supposed to give each other, a truth that could undo us both. And still, we lingered, suspended, daring to touch the edges of something dangerous and beautiful, neither of us ready to step back just yet. I was telling her something trivial about my day, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated, but didn't reach for it. She noticed, of course, because she always noticed. "Everything okay?" Her voice was soft, cautious, yet threaded with that subtle teasing edge that made my pulse skip. "Yeah, just a message," I said, trying to sound casual. My eyes met hers, and I realized the absurdity of it, how every glance between us felt like a loaded confession we weren't ready to speak aloud. She smiled faintly, stepping a fraction closer than necessary, and my stomach clenched. The air between us seemed suddenly too thin. I could feel the warmth radiating off her, the way her perfume clung to her hair, the soft brush of her sleeve against mine. I wanted to close the gap, to tilt my head toward hers, but every rational thought, every warning about boundaries, about social consequences, screamed at me to stop. Then, just as I was catching my breath, the door creaked. My heart jolted. Instinctively, we both turned, eyes wide, shoulders tense. Someone had been passing in the hall, or maybe it was just a shadow from outside the window. It didn't matter. The tension that had been quietly simmering exploded into 1,000 unspoken words, electric and frightening. We turned back to each other slowly. Her hand brushed against mine again, lingering longer than usual. I caught a fleeting glance at her lips and felt that almost impossible pull, the one that made every sensible rule in my head evaporate. We were so close now, breaths mingling, the world outside the kitchen gone completely. Her gaze flickered to my mouth, then back to my eyes, hesitant but not retreating. My own lips parted slightly, an involuntary invitation I couldn't take back, and she shivered ever so subtly, a tremor that went straight through me. I shouldn't. I started, but the words faltered. She tilted her head, eyes searching mine, full of a quiet understanding, and let her hand rest lightly against my chest. Not pressing, not demanding, but asserting a presence that made it impossible to pretend we were just friends. My heartbeat thundered against her palm. We paused, each breath a negotiation, each blink a battle between desire and reason. The room seemed impossibly still. Every minor sound, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the fridge, magnified. I wanted to lean in, to close the space that felt like it existed just for us, but we both froze, acutely aware of how fragile the moment was. And yet, even as we tried to resist, we drifted closer anyway. Her hand slid slightly higher on my chest, my shoulder brushing hers. The tension wrapped around us, tighter than ever, as if the universe had conspired to hold us suspended in that near-perfect, unbearable moment. I didn't know how long we stayed like that, inches apart, hearts racing in silent accord. I only knew one thing. We were closer than we'd ever been, and somehow it was both terrifying and inevitable. The kitchen had gone quiet again, but it was a heavy, charged silence, the kind where every breath felt amplified. I could feel her presence like heat radiating across the few inches that separated us. Her shoulder brushed mine lightly as she reached for the mug again, and my hand twitched, aching to follow the line of her arm, to feel more than just the ghost of touch. "I shouldn't," she whispered, almost to herself, voice low, fragile yet urgent. Her eyes held mine, searching, challenging, pleading. I caught the tremor in her fingers as she adjusted her hair, the loose strands falling over her face in a way that made her seem both tantalizingly real and impossibly distant. "I can't stop thinking about you," I blurted before I could rein in my own words, and immediately wished I could take them back. Her eyes widened, a flicker of shock, then something else, something raw and undeniable, a recognition that whatever line we'd been skirting was shifting under our feet. Her lips parted slightly, and she leaned just a fraction closer, almost imperceptibly, as if testing the air between us. My chest tightened. The smell of her, warm and subtle, filled my senses. I could feel her pulse against mine in that brief, silent connection, and I realized, for the first time, that she wasn't just a presence in my life, she was a weight, a gravity I couldn't resist. Her hand hovered near my jaw, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. My fingers itched to mimic the motion, to close that tiny gap, but I froze. Every rational thought, the son I couldn't betray, the world that would judge us, the precariousness of what we were doing, screamed at me to stop. I don't know if I should say this," she murmured, voice trembling, but she didn't step back. Instead, she leaned just enough that the warmth of her body pressed lightly against mine, and my knees threatened to buckle. I swallowed, my pulse racing. "Say it," I whispered, my lips almost brushing the shell of her ear. Her scent enveloped me. Coffee, faint vanilla, something uniquely hers, and the sound of her intake of breath was like a tiny confession. Her hand rested on my chest now, steadying herself, or perhaps me. I couldn't tell which. My gaze dropped to her lips for a moment before snapping back to her eyes, filled with that impossible mixture of longing, hesitation, and fear. The air between us vibrated with something neither of us could name, an invisible current pulling us closer, daring us to give in. My fingers twitched against the fabric of her blouse, her own hand tightening subtly on my chest in response. We were both teetering on the edge, aware of the boundary, savoring the impossibility, craving the surrender. And then, just as I leaned in, my lips barely an inch from hers, the quiet was shattered. Not by sound this time, but by a line she spoke low, breathless, and teasing in the most dangerous way. "If you cross this line, there's no going back." I thought the kitchen would swallow our silence, that the invisible current between us might finally ease. But then her phone buzzed sharply against the counter, breaking the spell. She glanced at it. A text from my friend. I didn't need to see the words to know what it implied. Someone had seen us together, or worse, suspected something already. Her hand froze midair, hovering near mine, and I could feel the sudden tension radiating off her. Her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting to me with a flicker of panic. And something else, something I wasn't sure I'd ever seen before. Fear mixed with desire. I didn't mean for him to know," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. Her fingers brushed mine in what should have been a casual gesture, but it landed like fire, and I flinched at the heat. "Who knows?" I asked, though the words came out more softly than I intended. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Part of me dreaded it, and part of me was caught in that delicious, unbearable tension. Her gaze dropped to the floor for a heartbeat, then returned to mine, intense, unwavering. She leaned closer, almost involuntarily, as if seeking safety in the closeness of a risk she couldn't admit. Her breath brushed my cheek, a whisper of warmth that made my pulse spike. "I've been careful," she said slowly, deliberately. Her hand slid up slightly along my chest, grazing the hollow at my throat. I thought I could control it. I thought I could. Her voice faltered. I reached instinctively, fingers barely brushing the curve of her waist. She didn't pull away, but she didn't encourage it either. It was the kind of hesitation that made everything more dangerous, more intoxicating. "I didn't think you'd feel the same," I admitted, low, almost desperate. My lips hovered near her ear, my words barely audible, but I wanted her to hear the confession, to feel it. Her body shivered slightly against mine, though she took a micro step back, giving herself the illusion of distance. Her hand lingered on mine a second longer than necessary before retreating to the counter, betraying the rationality she was trying to cling to. "I shouldn't. Not now," she murmured, eyes closing briefly as if that would steady her racing heart. "It's dangerous." But her words were contradicted by the way she leaned in again, the subtle press of her shoulder against mine, the tiny shiver that ran through her when our fingers brushed as she passed by. Every rational thought I had screamed to stop, but desire, forbidden and raw, tethered us together. I caught her gaze as she finally stepped back fully, yet not far enough to erase the invisible line that had been drawn between us. There was understanding in her eyes now, acknowledgement of the pull we both felt. "I can't pretend anymore," I said, voice barely a whisper, and I saw her inhale sharply. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The space between us was a promise, an unspoken agreement. We were standing closer than ever, hearts hammering in synchrony, caught between fear and longing, knowing the next move could destroy everything, or finally bring us together. The kitchen felt smaller than ever, walls pressing in, the late afternoon light fading into amber shadows. We were just inches apart, caught in that fragile, impossible space where desire and fear collided. My pulse hammered in my ears, and I could feel her breath brushing against my own, warm and uneven. "I can't," she whispered, voice trembling, eyes searching mine as if she were looking for permission, for a reason, for some safe way out that didn't exist. "Don't," I said, voice low, hoarse, as if speaking louder would shatter the spell. "Just don't stop this." Her hand hovered near mine, indecision written in the tiny movements of her fingers. I reached, taking her hand gently, letting our palms touch fully, letting the heat between us speak everything we hadn't dared to say. She didn't pull away, not even slightly, and that small act felt like surrender, like trust, like a bridge across the impossible. I could feel her leaning in subtly, the warmth of her shoulder pressing against mine. Her eyes closed for a heartbeat, then opened again, raw and unguarded. This could ruin everything," she murmured. "I don't care," I whispered back, my hand brushing the side of her face, careful, tentative. The way she shivered at the touch was electric, a confession louder than words could ever be. We paused there, breath mingling, hearts hammering in unison. I wanted to close the final inch between us, to let the world dissolve into that tiny, perfect moment. But the thought of consequences flickered in the back of my mind, and for the first time, it didn't stop me. It only sharpened the thrill, the need, the honesty of what we felt. "I've wanted this for so long," I admitted, voice barely audible. Every syllable seemed to vibrate in the small space between us. Her lips parted slightly, eyes locking onto mine with something fierce and vulnerable all at once. "So have I," she said, and in that instant, the world outside ceased to exist. No judgment, no sun, no rules, just us. We moved closer together, so close that I could feel every subtle shift of her body, every quickening breath. Her fingers traced lightly over my arm, small, deliberate touches that communicated everything words could not. I mirrored her hesitance and boldness in equal measure, leaning toward her, letting our closeness speak the truth we had been circling for weeks. And then, finally, we stopped the distance entirely. Lips almost touching, foreheads brushing, hearts thudding against one another. We were suspended on the edge, balanced between surrender and restraint, chaos and clarity. "I understand you," I whispered. "And I understand you," she replied, voice trembling with relief and want. For the first time, there was no ambiguity, no hesitation, no unspoken rules left to navigate. In that suspended, intimate moment, we were fully, irreversibly seen and fully, irreversibly together. The kitchen was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of the evening light, the tension that had held us taut for weeks finally easing. We stood close, shoulders brushing, hands intertwined without hesitation. The world outside, the rules, the judgments, the age gap, felt distant, almost irrelevant, reduced to nothing more than faint shadows at the edges of a space that now belonged entirely to us. Layla rested her head lightly against my chest, her hair brushing my collarbone. I could feel her breath slow, matching the rhythm of my own heart, a soft sigh that carried relief, contentment, and a quiet, unspoken promise. "You were right," she murmured, voice barely audible. "This is it's dangerous, but it's also real." I tilted my head, brushing a finger along the line of her jaw. "I don't care about dangerous," I said, voice low and sincere. "I care about you." Her lips curved into that familiar, subtle smile, the one that had always held both strength and vulnerability. "You always know what to say," she whispered, but I could feel the tremor in her hands, the lingering uncertainty that had clung to her for weeks, slowly melt away. We moved together to the small couch by the window, sitting close, thighs brushing, hands never letting go. I rested my forehead against hers, our breaths mingling, and felt an intimacy so complete it was almost overwhelming. Her fingers traced gentle patterns along my arm, tentative yet assured, like she was memorizing the feel of me, grounding herself in the truth of what we had chosen. "I was scared," she admitted quietly, "scared of everything. But now," her voice trailed off, and she nestled closer, letting me hold her in a way that spoke louder than any words could. "Now we know," I said softly, pressing my lips gently to her temple. "We know how we feel, and that's enough." We sat there in silence for a long time, not needing to fill the air with words, letting the warmth of our closeness speak for us. Outside, the evening deepened, lights flickering across the quiet street. But inside, time seemed to have stopped. Every small touch, a squeeze of the hand, a brushing of fingers, the quiet laugh that escaped her lips, felt like a vow. Not a vow to the world, but to each other. Finally, she lifted her head and met my gaze, eyes soft but fierce. "We'll figure it out," she said. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." I nodded, pressing my forehead against hers once more, feeling the steady pulse of her heart beneath my fingers. "Together," I echoed, letting the words settle between us like a promise made and kept. And in that simple human closeness, the warmth, the quiet laughter, the shared understanding, we finally found the clarity we had been circling all along. No regrets, no what-ifs, just us.